Hello, my name's Jackie Kay and I'm Chancellor of the University of Salford and also the Scottish Macker, or the National Poet of Scotland. For years I've been coming to Manchester Literature Festival and I really admire the whole festival. I admire its ethos, I admire the way that you support activists and political thinkers as well as writers known and less well known. I admire the way that you support writers in translation. I admire your Manchester sermon. I think the events have a great buzz and energy to them, and I've been at so many over the years. I've loved doing events myself, often with my dear friend Ali Smith. They've been fantastic events. I've also loved attending events like the Manchester Sermon, which have given me food for thought for a very, very long time. But it's upsetting to me that you're in danger now, and I would really love anybody who supports you and literature, new writing and writers around the world to dig a wee bit into your pocket and pay the price of a drink or the price of a theatre ticket or anything that you could actually afford, and go on the website www.manchesterliteraturefestival.co.uk. Cheers.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at the Manchester Literature Festival for Slay in Your Lane presents Loud Black Girls. I couldn't be more chuffed to be taking part in this event. It's so wonderful to meet all of you. I'm just going to take a second to introduce you to our audience. Today I'll be talking to Yomi Adegoke, who is an award-winning journalist and author who's worked at ITN, Channel 4 News, and whose writing appears in The Guardian, Vogue, Elle, and in The Independent. Along with Yomi, we're joined by Elizabeth Uviebinené, who is an award-winning author and columnist at T. She's a brand strategist whose work has been recognized as redefining the creative industry. Slay in Your Lane, which Yomi and Elizabeth put together, the Black Girl Bible, was published in 2019. And I have to say, as an aside, when my little girl received it in the post from her sister, she almost died. She was rolling on the floor with joy. So I'm really happy to meet both of you. The book was called The Most Engaging Analysis Ever to Have Reached Publication of Why It Is That Black British Women Still Feel Tattooed with Our Otherness. That was from the Daily Telegraph. And the Times said, the synthesis of 1,000 conversations about how to navigate career, love, family, racism, and unattainable beauty ideals as a Black British woman. Their new book is called Loud Black Girls, and also joining us are two contributors to that book. Neo, a Grammy and Mercury nominated singer-songwriter and record producer. Her essay in the book is titled, We Were Made for These Times. And we're also joined by Selina Thompson, an artist and writer whose work is currently focused on the politics of marginalization, the body, and relationships, amongst other things. She was awarded the Forced Entertainment Award in 2019. Please join me in welcoming them. So good to have you all here. Before I focus in on Yomi and Elizabeth, I just wanted to ask all of you a general question, one that's really important to me. You've all written about how important it is to recognize people who come, the women who come before you. And I wonder if in turn you could tell me who is your ancestor? And she can be somebody who is related to you by blood, or she can be an ancestor of the spirit. And this is a way to introduce yourselves. Yomi, can we start with you? Who's your ancestor?
I knew you were going to start with me. I was like, oh God, where do I go? I think I'll go for a biological ancestor, actually, which is my older sister, Yemisi Adegoke. She is, biologically my older sister. She's 6 years older than me, but she's also, she is my predecessor in terms of career. She is a journalist. She's an amazing journalist at BBC Africa, where she reports on news across Nigeria, but also like the Nigerian diaspora. But yeah, she's just massively inspiring to me. She sort of came up in the industry during the last recession, and it was really very difficult for her as a Black state-educated girl to sort of navigate journalism. Several horror stories that made me actually think I wouldn't want to be a journalist because she suffered so much. But she's just a complete pillar of strength and class, and she's amazing. I have the utmost respect for her, and I don't think I would be a journalist if it wasn't for her support and just her as a visible representation that it was possible.
That's really inspiring. Do you feel that your sister's experiences inform you in a way that you can sort of rise above things because she's experienced them already?
Absolutely. I always say that, like, you know, I mean, representation matters. But for me, having somebody in my house that actually looks exactly like me, to the point where we get mixed, people mix us up, both of my sisters, all the time. And, you know, even, I guess, given her experiences, even having that representation immediately, because she went through so much, I still wasn't sure if I actually would be able to make it as a journalist because of how much she went through. But having seen her sort of rise above that, it's difficult because, you know, you really can't, we always say you can't slay your way out of systemic racism. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And she really couldn't do that, but she still was able to make it in this industry, and it wasn't easy. And I feel that people like her that went through so much years before I sort of entered that space, honestly, if it hadn't been for all that she went through, I know that helped create space for journalists like me to come through, and, you know, so on and so on. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but, you know, I think definitely having her as a very visible role model for me, who literally like was in the room next door, was like a massive thing for me when I first was starting out.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful to have that inspiration close to home. Selina, I'm going to move to you and ask you in turn, who's your ancestor?
Oh, no. I think at a book event, I think I want to shout out the 3 women that wrote Heart of the Race, Black Women's Lives in Britain. So Beverly Bryan, Stella, forgive me if I mispronounce, Daisy, and Suzanne Scaife. It's an incredible book, and I remember picking it up and reading it for the first time and finally being able to see the work that my mum and my aunts and my godparents and my family friends were doing to survive in this country commemorated and archived and recognised for the activism that it was. And I think every little Black girl should have to read it. Like, when we turn like 14, we should all get it free in the post, because it's just beautiful. And I think whenever I'm feeling lost about like what my mission is, or when I'm feeling like overwhelmed by like the specific task of staying rooted in the fact that we are Black in Britain and that that's a specific context, I feel like that text is always both an anchor and a compass for like what I need to do and how I want to do it. So I want to shout out to the 3.
Yeah, that's magic. And you immediately went to finding 3 ancestor spirits within the written text. And I think it's very nicely to what Yomi was saying about that representation matters, because you see yourself and then there's a challenge. That's really wonderful. Naya, I'm going to move on to you. Who's your ancestor?
Hello, hi. I actually think I'm going to choose my father as my ancestor. His name is Harris Joshua, and since I was young anyway, he has also been a writer. He, as his job was the chief executive of Nottingham City Council, but he also wrote in his spare time. So he wrote about the Bristol riots in the 70s, and he's 70 now, and he's just about to release another book called The Circle of 5. And in that, he's talking about the journey of 5 Black Caribbean women and their journey into the UK and how like different their stories are. And you know, that's kind of the story of my ancestors as well. It's the story of my mum, it's the story of my grandmother, and both my grandmothers, you know. And I think that's a story that gets lost a lot. We hear about Windrush, but it's just kind of this like it's just like one story for everybody. Do you know what I mean? Where everybody's story is so different, coming from different Caribbean islands, and what it means to be Black, British and Caribbean. And I just really I really appreciate him for lifting us up and our voices, and I'm really proud to be his daughter, and also have done a little bit of writing myself for Loud Black Girls.
I am so excited that you mentioned your father. That was one of the questions I had coming up, because I think there's something to be said for being the daughter of a feminist father who pushes you forward in that way. So that's great. Elizabeth, I'm going to end this round of questions with you. Who's your ancestor?
Just following on the theme of representation, I would choose June Sarpong, who is a broadcaster and author, and she is in our first book, Slaying the Lane, and she's been somebody that, you know, growing up was provided such a powerful representation for so many Black women and girls in this country, and is amazing that how many years later she's still here. And she's still kind of like doing amazing things and still providing that representation. So there's something to be said about that, and just how, as a person, she's just, you know, really wonderful, and definitely is as great as she is as on screen growing up.
That's wonderful. Thank you all for sharing those ancestor spirits with us. I think why that question is important for me is that you all, in your introductions and your essays, hint at the importance of seeing yourself and the people who allow you to see yourselves. I'd like to focus on Elizabeth and Yomi for a second now, because one of the things that Slay in Your Lane did, for example, was to give, I guess it's called the Black Girl Bible, but the women that you bring together there and the words that you give them yourselves, I found myself wishing that I had had this book when I first moved to England in my early 20s, because I wanted to know where I could end up, and there was nowhere to go. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to write that book and how you feel about what's happened on its publication? Because it has been really important across the board culturally.
Sorry, go on, Elizabeth.
I can answer the first part of the question around why we wanted to write it. I guess honestly, why we wanted to write it was just because I was encountering challenges, you know, being the only Black girl in the office. So it was essentially something that I thought there was a challenge, like there was a problem, which was, you know, microaggressions, feeling that I had to try twice as hard to be heard. And to be seen as equal in a white-dominated, like, corporate space. So I wanted like a book that essentially could speak to my experiences and not have to think that I have to, I guess, take on a feminist text, a women's book, and kind of apply it to my career or just general, you know, young people. I wanted like a specific understanding of my experiences. So it was essentially just to solve a problem, like have a better understanding of my experiences, and that's why that's where it kind of like came from. And then when I asked Yomi to write it, it became more broad and more like this is something that more than one person is experiencing.
Wonderful, Yomi. I wonder how you are responding, what you've seen in the response to Slaying Your Lane and what it means for you, because it is sort of a cultural marker, at least, you know, as a book.
Thank you so much, Ella. Those are really kind terms to describe it in. I think in terms of what the response has been, it's been unexpected for sure. You know, we had high hopes for the book. It's why we chose to do it. Like, we definitely didn't want this to be, we were speaking a lot about, you know, the idea that Black women's stories are often posited as niche. They're posited as, you know, they can't be mainstream. They're not marketable. So that was something that we wanted to kind of, you know, do away with immediately. So we wanted this to be broad, and we wanted this, you know, to be written by Black women for Black women, but in the same way that most books that we see on the shelves are written by white people with white people in mind. We all still read them, we all still enjoy them. So we felt that, you know, there's no reason that despite this being about a very specific experience, this can't be something that everybody enjoys, because a lot of the themes are genuinely like universal, despite the advice and the kind of conversations being quite specific. So, but we set out, you know, with, I guess, a knowledge that the likelihood was mainly this would resonate with Black women, and potentially only with Black women. So to see so many people from different backgrounds, of different races, of different genders, take to this book and feel that, you know, obviously Black women of all ages as well, which has been amazing to see, really young Black women, older Black women, across generations, it's really resonated with them. But also to see, Black men sort of speaking about what they've learned from it, white men, white women, just non-Black people, full stop, and people of different genders sort of saying, this is something that I've learned from. If I didn't necessarily feel like it validated my own individual experience, because I'm not a Black woman, I definitely learned about the experiences of what Black women are experiencing in this country, because so often the stories that we're told are African American and about what it is to be a Black woman within the American context. That was something that me and Elizabeth really wanted to we really wanted to have the conversations about what it is to be a woman in this country, a Black woman in this country. And I think, it was certainly, we certainly were surprised basically by how well it was taken to, by the mainstream. The two quotes that you read at the beginning were from the Telegraph and the Times, and we certainly didn't think they'd be.
Yeah, exactly. I was quite surprised that as I was looking up quotes to use, thinking really those two publications, but that's fantastic. I'm really moved about what you both say about something not being there and then you wanting to create it. It makes me think of Toni Morrison saying that she writes for Black women, and if other people are reading it, then, that's fine too. And it's something that you often find in fiction, but to find it in real life stories, I think is really exciting. Something that you're quite clear about is the centering of ourselves as Black women in public discourse. And I wanted you to unpack that a little bit for us, because it felt really important to me, as it's not just about putting ourselves at the center of our own worlds, but you're talking about doing so in public discourse. What do you mean, and how do we do that? Should we start with you, Elizabeth?
Can you just provide a bit more detail on that question?
Yeah, so there's a part in the introduction, I think it's Bernadine's introduction, Bernadine Evaristo, who says that it's important, for us to ask, what does it mean to center ourselves as Black women in public discourse? And it was the last part of that, the public discourse, that really interested me. And I wanted to know what that meant for you.
I think it's just, living unapologetically like as you are and not having to shrink yourself. That's what I get from that. I think for so many Black women in this country, it's always easier to actually, I wouldn't say it's easier, but in order to get by, in order to kind of move on from day to day, to amend ourselves and to modify ourselves, and especially and visually, but also our voices. So you have code switching in at work and in general life, and having to kind of check that your appearance is suitable in terms of your hair and things like that. You leave your house and things like that. So I think it's just really living unapologetically. That's what that discourse looks like for me, and that's what centering Black women looks like.
Yeah, that's exciting. When you're talking about sort of your the code switching in the presentation, I always think of my mother and many African mothers who talk about presentation and how important that outward presentation is. Yomi, I want to maybe rephrase the question a little bit for you. I wonder if you could tell us, what would the world look like if, as Black women, instead of switching codes to fit the public conversation, we did indeed, as Bernadine says, center ourselves? What does that world look like?
That's a very good question. What would that world look like? I think that world would look a lot more authentic, for a start. It would look a lot healthier. I think we don't often talk about the often invisibilized mental toll that all of these, do you know what I mean? Like all of these little, they feel little, but they're actually quite large concessions that we make on a daily basis in order to not feel, alienated or marginalized or just othered. Whether it be, as Elizabeth was saying, in terms of your appearance, whether it be modifying how you look, modifying how you speak, all of these small concessions, which then create huge concessions, they're taxing, they're tiring. I think it would look a lot healthier if we had a world in which we were allowed to be unapologetically ourselves, and we felt allowed to do that. I think it would be a more I think it'd be a more interesting world as well, if I'm being honest. Because I think when you look at, I mean, obviously there are millions, billions of Black women that are living, you know, their truths regardless of all these stipulations and difficulties. But even within doing that, they are doing so whilst having a keen awareness of the fact, well, primarily if we're talking within a Western context and within predominantly white spaces, they're having to do that in spite of, they're having to do that knowing that there might be backlash, knowing that they're going to have to weather a storm if you don't choose to like have a particular type of hairstyle when you go into a workplace. And when I say I think it'd be more interesting, it's because like we talk a lot about diversity in a almost kind of like, often in an almost white savior way, in terms of, you know, it's the right thing to do. Sure, that's true, but moral arguments aside, like I think, yeah, we've discussed this a lot, that there is intrinsic value in diversity. Like there is, in terms of diverse workforces, it's been proven that, you know, it's better for everybody in terms of having a diverse workforce. And it's kind of like, if you extrapolate that out onto a global level, of course, allowing people to live as themselves is useful to everybody. We encourage different perspectives. We're able to learn from each other more freely. But when you're kind of compressing and condensing people into one specific way of life or one specific version of success, then you just miss out on entire swathes of, you know, just the most interesting parts of life. But yeah, I think it would be a world that, I hope it's a world that we're like leaning towards, or we're trying to sort of move towards, but I just think it would just be a healthier, happier, better functioning world for everybody.
You know, one of the things that's really exciting for me about both of your books, and actually just your very existence as a sort of African woman who's lived here for 30 years and I'm now 54, is the fact that I'm sure, and there's evidence that you know things that I didn't know at this age, and that you are saying them out loud. It's really important to me. And I'm really happy, Yomi, that you mentioned health, because one of the things I wondered as I was reading through the introductions and the essays is wondering what, you know, the opposite of loud is the being silent and holding it in. And there's a mental toll, there's a physical toll to that, which is, you know, shown in some of the diseases of, you know, hypertension and so on that our communities can have. And I just wondered if you, how closely you felt it as a, I don't know, not as a burden, but as something that you carry as, you know, sort of the next generation on from mine, that you are claiming freedoms and claiming space in a way that your mothers perhaps prepared you to do, but weren't able to do themselves. What does that mean for you? What does that relationship mean for you? And how do you see it?
It's a very interesting question. I think that we're actively almost still figuring it out as a generation. I think that every generation thinks they're more revolutionary than the last, and there's that, you know, there's a real activism present in this generation. I think that you're right, that it does come at a different type of cost than I guess it might. It comes at a different type of cost. And I think it's a relationship that we're still kind of figuring out, because we know that the constant striving for excellence, the constant striving to be, you know, to slay, to thrive, to kill it, to be always great, does come at cost. And I think we're aware that constant on always activist nature that we are gravitating towards as a generation isn't inherently always healthy. So I think what we found towards the end of this summer's resurgence of Black Lives Matter was just towards the end of it, a real sense of Black joy as a kind of as a space to kind of seek refuge in. And yeah, to live like this all the time isn't particularly, to always have an opinion, to always be seen, to always have to push yourself and be heard. It comes at a cost, and I think that it can't come at a cost to our health, because I think we'll fall down the same trap that our previous generations did as well. With the, so I think it's something that we're very much mindful of, and we know it's unsustainable. But I think I'm definitely seeing a discourse that's emerging around Black joy and peace being, I don't know if the right word is peace, but self-care and all of those things being a real resistance to racism and anti-racism at that.
Is it? I don't know if it's. I think it's Audre Lorde who said that self-care is a revolutionary act. Which I've always loved. Yomi, do you want to respond to that question about the cost of activism, as Elizabeth is talking about?
Yeah, no, I just completely agree. I think as well, we're in an interesting time where, I don't know, it feels as though being very vocal and being very visible and talking about certain things is being rewarded in a particular way, which we haven't necessarily seen before. I guess, when I first started writing on the internet about 8 years ago about like race and racism, and just anytime I spoke or touched on these subjects, I often received, swathes of abuse. And, it would often at times be actually difficult for people to pick up my commissions because I'd be saying stuff that essentially I think they weren't certain that their readership wanted to hear. Now those very same publications will go out of their way to kind of commission me for writing about race. But I'm always wary about when these conversations are heavily embedded within the mainstream, because it often means the defanging of those conversations. So like with feminist discourse, the kind of like, I don't know how to put it, but like the pinkification, the kind of like, I don't know, like girl bossification of like feminism and how that became a super mainstream thing. We've seen the same thing with Pride. And I always remember thinking like, gosh, it will take years for that to be the case with Black Lives Matter, because race and racism is such a touchy subject. But now it's like you're seeing like the most kind of like racially, like ignorant of brands kind of like talking a lot about race and using that almost as a marketing tool. So I think we're in a bit of a strange space because, yeah, it can almost feel like it's become mainstream in a way, and the conversation's become central in a way that I guess even when we put out our book, it wasn't. We weren't sure if, we should even have the subtitle, The Black Girl Bible, because we genuinely felt that would turn people off because people didn't want to talk about Black things. Now, 5 years later, 5 years because the conversation took place initially in 2015, we're in a very different landscape, but I think it's one we have to watch because I wonder what that means for where we'll actually be in the next 5 years, and whether this is surface level change or whether this is, the same way the feminist conversation went and was essentially neutralized by how mainstream became. I think also as well, a lot of people I always say to people like, just again, like, let's think about the next 5 years, are people that are speaking very openly about these issues and not necessarily in a way that coddles whiteness or centers whiteness. Could there be a potential ramifications down the line? Like, could people potentially, because there was a period on Twitter when a lot of people were calling out their employers, and I was kind of watching it like interested in how this would play out. Very all well and good in the next 2 months for everyone to like, that's great, speak out about your experiences. And I kind of thought I'd be so interested to see if those employers essentially penalize those people that spoke out in the next few years when it's less fashionable for to be discussed.
I think it's really wise to point out that caution, and what you, I guess, are both talking about this tension between knowing that there are things that need to be changed, and also knowing that part of what we are fighting for is the right to think about flowers, if we want to think about flowers that day, Exactly. Before I move on to your two contributors, I just wonder if you could very briefly tell me, how did you choose the women that you chose to feature in both books? Because one of the things that is really important for me is that you create a sense of community and continuity. And I wondered how you made those choices. Elizabeth.
So with Loud Black Girls, as you said, we've had an extraordinary couple of years since we published the first book. So alongside that journey, we've met amazing women and from our generation who we really wanted to platform their voices, women that should be household names. So I remember, so it was very much, like you said, that community of just, it felt really natural. It didn't feel like it was very much a hard thing to kind of work out who we wanted to be in it. So for example, Sophia the Call, I was at an award show last year, or was it the year before? I wasn't sure. And she was performing, and I remember she was just really brilliant and just blew me away. and I thought she was just like outstanding. And I remember messaging Yomi the same night and just saying that, wow, so I've heard about this girl before, but her performance is just amazing. We really need to get her in Loud Black Girl. And I think similarly with Yomi can tell the story of how she met Selina and like Neo, and so I think all of it just has come from our own taste and interests and people who bumped into events over the last 2 years.
Wonderful. I'm going to move on to Neo and Selina now, and hopefully we can come back to both of you. But it's just really wonderful hearing some of the intellectual and I guess emotional underpinnings of this work from both of you, and you speak beautifully about it. Neo, I'm going to start with you. You did say a little bit that you come from a family of a father who's a writer, and I wonder if before you read for us, your piece is about a post-Brexit possibility, and I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit why you chose to write this particular essay.
Sure. So I chose to write the essay based on the question itself, actually, which was kind of what does the future look like after Brexit for Black women? And I think I just sort of took it quite literally because I was like, what really does it look like? And I think the thing is for me being Black and British, it's like when we talk about things about racism, like I honestly felt like it wasn't really spoken about in the UK, and that up until now, should I say, and like it was very much like under the carpet. Do you know what I mean? Like I knew it was there. I could see it was happening to my friends, but like it was like we weren't talking about it to each other. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's just because a lot of us are operating in very white spaces, and so when you are having those conversations, you can feel like it's just, you know, hitting on dead ears, or people will be like, that doesn't happen over here. And then when Brexit did happen, obviously like it all just came from under the carpet. You know, we realized that actually like racism is still really prevalent in the UK, and it's really hasn't been dealt with, and it's just been laying dormant. That's all it is. And so it felt quite right to sort of tackle the subject head on, really, and just talk about what it is like now, and hopefully what the future could be as us and future generations take the voice and make things better for us.
There is a sort of a note of hope there, but I was really struck. I think you're saying in your essay that, you know, there isn't necessarily a before and after if you're a Black woman, that, you know, we were dealing with the same things before and we're still dealing with those things now. And so it's almost as if we inhabit an alternate reality that's not sort of that mainstream, which comes back to what we were talking about earlier about that public discourse. And I guess a really good way to center ourselves in that is to have you read to us. I think we'd originally said 8 minutes. If we can keep it a bit shorter, because I obviously talked too long with Elizabeth and Yomi. We really want to hear you reading.
That's okay. Yeah, I can keep it shorter, no problem. So the essay is called We Were Made for These Times. When I was asked to write an essay about what the future holds for Black women in an uncertain post-Brexit world, it wasn't immediately obvious how to respond. I tried to stay informed, but I'm no expert in politics or economics. I'm a musician. Musicians are expressive and instinctive rather than predictive and analytical. I write about my experiences and my feelings, hoping that they resonate with people, maybe even resonate with society more broadly. I don't make predictions or grand statements, so I decided to stick to what I know and tell you how I feel about the future. And it turned out, after thinking very hard about this, that feelings are important. To consider a post-Brexit future, first I had to work out how I felt about our past and our present. What was life like for Black British women before Brexit, Trump, and the rise of the far right? Was it a utopian existence where prejudice didn't exist? Well, the short answer is no. It was confusing and oftentimes painful. It's not as if prejudice and inequality disappeared when Obama became the leader of the free world. The problem was systemic and generally hard to prove. And even if the evidence was available, was anybody willing to look at it? As a woman of colour, I was being told the future was sorted, that I had just as many chances as everyone else in life. With free movement across 28 different countries and freedom to speak out on social media, there were no wars and no talks of wars in Mexico. But I didn't feel like that. When I found myself as the only Black person in the shop, being followed around by suspicious staff, when I saw my brown and black-skinned friends picked up by police for stop and search, all pulled out of airport queues by security, it didn't feel like we had prejudice nailed. When I saw women of colour being ignored by the media, paid less than their male counterparts and almost entirely absent from the upper echelons of business, that didn't feel like equality. But Obama was in office and diversity was the buzzword, and one might have believed that the world was heading in the right direction. It's not as if my life was bad back then. I was working as a professional musician, but I struggled with confidence. And as you may have heard me say before, I never thought that becoming an artist, touring and releasing music across the world was a possibility for me, as there was only a small handful of Black artists in the UK who had previously done so. And I think other young and ethnic minority people felt the same way about jobs at the top of their industry. We believed that those jobs were for a different type of person. And then the 2016 referendum happened. Its immediate aftermath was as bad as could be expected, especially for Black and ethnic minority women. Incidents of racism increased, poisonous colonial nonsense started spreading to the right-wing press, and people previously only able to whisper in pubs found the courage to share their views on social media. UKIP, with the added voice of the EDL, received 12% of the vote in 2017 election, and all of a sudden, it seemed as though we were heading back into the 1970s. I'm just going to skip on to get to a more hopeful section. Goodbye. Against this backdrop, it would be right to be pretty pessimistic about the future. Yet, despite it all, I still feel that there is a cause for hope. As many of us know from our own lives, things often get worse before they get better. And in the midst of all the negativity of the recent years, I have seen, and I'm still seeing, some beautiful things arising in direct response. The power of the youth. Young people are passionately taking up the challenge of resistance, not just in Britain, but across the world. Teenagers and young adults have stepped up to lead some of the world's biggest conversations and finding themselves faced with this huge question about the future of their country. Young British people, especially Black minority ethnic people, have engaged more with politics than any other time in history. Record numbers of young people had registered to vote in the upcoming election in 2019, and 1 in 5 new voters were Black. People have marched, people have written, people have used social media in innovative ways. In the world of British music, inspirational figures like Stormzy, Dave, Little Sims, Idols, and Slow Time, to name a few, have emerged and are creating modern day protest music. I myself, having previously only sung, have been inspired to speak. I felt empowered to join the debate and have spoken to young people across Oxford University, Cambridge University, El Weekender, Black Girl Fest, Galdem, and the South Bank. I feel we are creating space and engaging in our own future as a collective more now than ever before. In finding my voice, I've sought out others who are engaging on a huge range of important topics, not just in Britain, but across the world. And so I feel hopeful about the next generation.
Naya, thank you so much. That's fantastic writing. I love that you give this sort of clear-eyed and really serious analysis of the before and after and the now. But you also stop and say feelings are important at the very beginning. And I wanted to just ask you one question before moving on to Selina about this idea of, you before you only sang and now you moved to speak. I thought you put that really, really beautifully. What is the connection for you between sort of your art and your activism? Are they the same thing or are they different parts of you?
I thought that they were different parts of me, but I realise now that actually they are the same. I think it's so important that I have a voice, and even though I use it to sing, that I use it also in activism as well. And I think the two can marry each other quite well. Like it can marry in my music, in my songwriting, and in all the other sort of like avenues that life has taken me, for instance, in writing for Loud Black Girls, or in and doing talks or collaborating with other artists, like whatever it means. So I think the two are beginning to come together, but it's quite new for me.
Well, it's exciting for us. And I guess one last question. Do you, so my question, oh dear. I was thinking about you as an artist. Do you feel that this is more something that's a necessary truth for a Black female artist than it is for another artist out there, say a white woman or a white man? Do you feel that finding that link between your art and activism is something that's a necessary truth for you in a way that's specific to your identity as a Black woman?
I don't know if it's a necessary truth. I think it's each to their own, you know. I think other Black British artists are going to say different things to me, and not everybody has to use their platform for activism. Not everybody feels comfortable or feels the need to. Do you know what I mean? But it feels right for me at this moment in my time to kind of bring the two together, and I think other Black British artists are also finding the courage almost to speak out, because, like as we said, not many of us have had a platform before. It's taken a really long time to get to this point. So I think we will see, though, more of it now and in the future.
Yeah, and it's wonderful for us to have the chance to hear your voice in its different forms. That's really, really great. Selina, I'd like to move to you now before we close. And just to speak to you, I loved your essay. I immediately smiled when I saw what it was about, because, at my age, 30 seems so young. Back to my girlhood. But tell us why you chose to write on this subject, and how did you approach it?
I really struggled with the ask, because usually if I'm asked to contribute to any kind of anthology, I'll write something that's a polemic, and it will be like kind of forceful and, angry. And I really didn't want to do that here. And so I really struggled figuring out what to write. But I've been in talking therapy for a really long time, and turning 30 was coming up a lot. And there were so many things in my life that I wanted to be different. And I think more than any other birthday I had approached, I kind of really sat down and I was kind of like, what do I want for my life? Like, what is going to bring me joy? What is going to like nurture and feed love within my life? And I'm not a very romantic person necessarily. So to find myself, and I extend that romance like beyond like sort of marriage, romantic partner romance within friendships, within everything. I wouldn't say that's what I'm like, but I found myself wanting to cultivate that. And luckily I've been offered a space to explore the future. So this is where I ended up.
I loved your approach, because there is, dare I say, sass there. There's humor, and then there's also, quite a lot of serious things are said. Can you read for us, please?
Absolutely. I'm going to start with the introduction, and then I'm going to do a little jump. Okay. And I've got a timer that's what I'm feeling about with. Okay. So the essay is called A Crocus Ruminates, 30 Thoughts on Turning 30. I'm presuming you're reading this in 2020, which means that all being well, I'm turning or turned 30 this April to a fanfare of purple crocus buds. I find that when my brain is not full to the brim with work, or mourning the inability of my own knees to keep up with Megan Thee Stallions, this change is all I think about. It's exhilarating. It feels very new, but also laden with possibility. As silly and random as they can be, milestones give us a framework to evaluate the landscape of our lives, and if we so choose, to create change. My 30th birthday just so happens to coincide with the change in the decade, so I get to see this play out in the political as well as the personal. So, in honour of my 30th year, the century's 20th year, and a decade of watching Black British women continue to slay in the face of spectacular odds, I present an excerpt of my 30 thoughts on turning 30. Number 12. I feel like a crocus before spring, somewhere underground, trying to germinate. 13. From here beneath the soil, I find that I want to turn away from excellence. 14. When I say excellence, I'm referring to the drive, the relentless, unforgiving, all-encompassing, completely insatiable drive to be the best in all that I do. The constant competition with other versions of myself. Or perhaps it's competition with others, with those who should be my sisters, and I'm saying with myself to soften the violence of this thought. Whatever the case may be, there is always a competition and winning is the only available option. 15. What might an alternative be? Jay-Z starts Murder to Excellence with the words Black excellence, opulence, decadence, and it is fitting that both he and Kanye West, enthralled as they both are to a vision of Black capitalism as liberation, present a binary of death or ostentatious achievement and wealth. I wonder increasingly about the value of pushing for excellence and what its cost is. 16. I wonder about how the demand for excellence and the hierarchy it necessitates might invalidate community thinking. 17. Many of the jibes against millennials centre on the idea of participation awards, of each of us being special and of entitlement. This does not tally with my experience of being tested at every level of my education, of teenage years and then an academic life shaped by the pursuit of excellence. Straight A stars at GCSE and straight A's at A-level. No first in my degree, but at least I left with a prize, a smorgasbord of extracurricular activities, all achieved while almost always working a 30-hour-per-week job at the same time. 18. This continued into my 20s, which were defined by professional excellence, by agreeing to never-ending requests to work for free, and with no notion whatsoever of professional boundaries. I had no sense of what might be safe and what might not, of who I might be outside of my working life and what that person might want. 19. It should be said that I don't regret or mourn this. I honour who I have been for the past 30 years, and I am thankful for my focus, hard work and drive. My job has taken me across 6 continents, given me creative expression, some political agency, and even, at times, fun. My career would not have been possible without my education. Choosing to regret it feels odd and counterintuitive. Overwork has often been a temporary salve to loneliness and isolation for me. It has felt like the answer to the ambitions and sacrifices of our parents. But this doesn't mean I want more of the same. 20. I don't think I'm alone in this. I see it in the words of Roxane Gay's Hunger, between the pages of Slay in Your Lane, in the earnest and well-meaning respectability politics of Michelle Obama's Becoming, in the legacy of underappreciated Black women expected to save the world. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. This force, the drive to excel, creates and transforms, and when we succeed, it tells us that we are special, not just in spite of capitalist standards, but also by them. It is this drive that gently holds our egos together, and as such it has a purpose. Ego keeps us going. It keeps us sane when all the odds are stacked against us and the world refuses to see us. God knows Black women need that. And that's 5 minutes.
Amen, Selina. That is, it's fantastic because it's poetic and honest and challenging. I know that you're writing it at the age of 30, but I think it speaks to Black women across generations. It's really a beautiful piece of writing. You say at one point in the essay that we make ourselves at every turn, which I found incredibly beautiful, and it made me wonder who I am making. as I walk through this life. And, you know, we started off our conversation talking about the ancestors who came before us. I want to close with that thought in mind about us making ourselves at every turn, because I think that both of these books, Slaying Your Lane and Loud Black Girls, are about us seeing how other women are becoming, to use Michelle Obama's words, how they are becoming, how we're living in the world. And doesn't need to necessarily be hopeful, although I guess we should try. And I think I'll start with you, Selina. When you say we make ourselves at every turn, who are you making?
Gosh. I think I want to make someone I guess, like, not to get too maudlin, like, all of us are trying, right? To feel like whenever death comes, that we can be okay with that, right? That we can look back on our lives and we can go, I tried to live it to the fullest with joy, and I tried to, like, extend love to people around me, and I tried to leave the world in a better state than I found it. And I think I'm trying to make someone that can, like, die with that set of feelings. But I'm also trying to, like, make someone who doesn't spend all of their life energy. I think one of the big challenges that you have if you are engaged in struggle, particularly Black struggle, queer struggle, class struggle, feminist struggle, is that you put all of your energy into fighting and you forget to try to live the change experience, to have joy and peace and pleasure. And I want to live that too, as well as doing the work. I want all of those things for myself and for the people around me. So that's who I'm trying to make.
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth, who are you making? You're muted.
Sorry. I think Selina summed it up for me, if I'm honest. I don't think I can come and say anything any more profound than that. I echo everything she said.
Yeah, I think it did speak for us. Naya, do you want to add to that? Who are you making, or who are we making together? Oh, Naya's frozen. Okay. Are you with us, Naya? Let's go to you, Yomi, to close.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like the idea, sorry, Selina, we're all just going to be like biting what you said, but like, honestly, the idea of just like, you know, trying to be somebody or make somebody that I guess when it's all said and done, you can look back on and be sort of, I wouldn't even necessarily say proud, but just assured that you had done your bit to make the world even the slightest bit better. I think that's a really kind of like, yeah, I think that's a big thing for me, essentially, that I don't know. I think especially right now with how conversations around like activism and just, I guess, bettering the world are taking place. I guess I'm really these days trying to come back to the why of it and the why I am doing certain things in certain ways and like divesting from certain ideas of what I guess I'm supposed to be doing and really coming back to myself and understanding what matters to me and what I want to do to try and leave a legacy that goes beyond work, I'd say, or leave a legacy that goes beyond, I guess, again, to speak to Selina's point, like Black excellence or being excellent or achievement within the workplace. But I don't know, even if it's just my loved ones feeling like I've been kind to them or that I've been good for them, a good, what's the word, like influence on their lives. I think, yeah, I'm just trying to like really recenter myself and make sure that everything I'm doing is imbued with a sense of or an understanding of why I'm doing it. Because I think that just that clarity means that when it is all said and done, I can look back and understand that I've essentially done my best, not just by myself, but by people that I care about.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we're going to finish with you. We've all been answering that question that is posed in Selina's essay when she says we make ourselves at every turn. Who are you making?
Oh, well, I guess for me, I just made a daughter.
Please go on.
And I guess I'll think about it in the context of her, and I think, Selina, you did say it. What I was thinking, which is, I think all I will ask of her is that she leaves this world a tiny bit better than when she arrived. And it doesn't have to be anything profound that she has to do. She doesn't have to be the leader of the free world or anything like that. But if she can just help someone, over a tough period in her life, or however small it is or how big it is, I think that's all we can do as we're having time on this planet, is to try and leave it a better place than when we arrived.
I'm so grateful to all of you for your time, and to the audience. You can buy both Slay in Your Lane and Loud Black Girls on the Manchester Literary Festival bookshop. And also remember that in these very difficult times for the arts, if you are able to donate to the Manchester Literary Festival to make sure that it keeps going on with events such as this, we would be very grateful. Yomi, Selina, Neo, and Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work and your words. And I guess if I was to answer that last question, I would say that, young women like you are my dreams come true. And it's been such an honor and such a pleasure to spend time with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.